screwed that up. See if I can do this again. Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the Auditor General of the state joins me to talk about the prevention of waste, fraud, and abuse of your tax dollars. But first, is peace breaking out in the state capitol? Let's get to it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, it's quite unbelievable that this week, after a huge brouhaha over the firing of the open records head and the withdrawal of a couple of dozen of appointees to boards and commissions that Governor Corbett made on his way out, Governor Tom Wolf and Republican leaders have worked out a deal on the replacement of two new Supreme Court justices. They will serve out the balance of some terms ending next December, or maybe early January. Joining me to talk about this, Robert Swift with Shamrock-Newspapers and Karen Langley from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, two reporters that cover all these stories. We'll put up their Twitter feeds. You can follow them on Twitter and whatever else. All right, Robert, let me just start with you. Peace is breaking out. Maybe I know you're going to say as a reporter, yeah, like really.
Well, there's certain issues, times when they want to do peace, and typically you got to remember these two Supreme Court appointments. One fills a vacancy created by a justice who resigned under pressure last fall, McCaffrey. So there was a scandal there,
right.
And the other was the Chief Justice had to retire. So typically, when these kind of things come up, they sort of want to. I think there's a tendency to want to get something.
Get it done and quickly.
Superior person in their qualifications that can get in there, especially in the Supreme Court, two vacancies. So that's where other times they want to fight. So they're always looking for a fight somewhere. Yeah,
but Karen, what's fascinating is Robert points out one retiree, or actually a person who was convicted of public corruption, Republican, the other a retiree based on the, resigned because of the pornographic email scandal. One Democrat, one Republican. Made it a little easier, didn't it? Replacing them by party?
Well, having, I think, two positions open, certainly does have the potential for making it easier to have a deal between the two sides for confirmation.
Yeah. I mean, in this case, one of them, Thomas Kistler, he's the president judge of the Center County Court of Common Pleas, well regarded. A Republican, also happens to be from the same county as the majority leader of the Senate, Jay Corman. The Democrat in this case, Ken Gormley, a Duquesne law professor, highly regarded, a nationally recognized constitutional scholar. I'll ask both of you, is there going to be any debate about this in the Senate, or does this get done?
No, the only issue to make him up is whether they would agree not to run for a full term.
Yeah, and I think they both have done that.
And the other thing is that, on the Supreme Court right now, there's only one justice who's not from the Philly and Pittsburgh metro areas, and that's Corey Stevens of Luzerne County.
So you get
some
the
more
center
geographical
county
balance.
Although he's up again and has to run also for these seats.
Yeah, that's right. Karen is referring the fact that an unprecedented. How many justices up for?
There will be three seats open on the seven-seat court, so quite a lot. I
think you have to go back to do I want to say 18th century into the 1700s to find that? All right, Karen, I said peace is breaking out. Well, where we didn't have peace was Governor Wolf comes in, fires the open records head, a guy named Eric Arneson, who would work for the Senate, but it seems that even there now, some deal has been worked out, right, to move this case forward. Explain that.
Well, so there was a hearing this week for a preliminary injunction in Commonwealth Court in which the administration, argued defended its firing of Eric Arneson, who was a Senate Republican aide and was put in by Governor Corbett in the last days of his term. The Senate Republicans and Eric Arneson argue that harm is being done and that he should be restored to his position right away. There's a deal, I suppose, in the sense that both sides agreed that instead of dealing with this, immediate action by the court issue, that they'd wait a month and have a hearing in March in front of a full panel of
full
Commonwealth Court
yeah.
judges to kind of,
Right.
get a decision from the court.
Yeah, now both sides, in a sense, I mean, Arneson, I think, tweeted this week that he was happy about it. Now, he's out of his job, but the challenge originally that was made that the Senate Republicans had no standing, that's gone. So apparently, Robert, you agree with Karen, this is going to the full court. There'll be a hearing in March.
Court, and, I look at it, okay, the hearing's in a month, but maybe the Wolf administration and the Senate Republicans can strike their own deal.
Yeah.
In the meantime, one of the deals involves the controversial hiring of some of the counsels to that office and demotion of others, and maybe they can work out
Karen
some deal and just
head,
clear it away. And,
Both sides are claiming victory with this agreement in court yesterday.
And that's when they go ahead.
As we often expect, but with Governor Wolf's office saying, Mr. Arneson is not allowed to be in the Office of Open Records, participating in that process in this interim period, and then Mr. Arneson's counsel saying, well, we're going to get a speedy resolution on this, which is what we want.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, the continuing woes and a very sad last couple of weeks with the resignation of State Treasurer Rob McCord, now is facing two extortion counts. He's going to plead guilty to them, apparently. We'll talk a little bit about the repercussions on that and a subject or two more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business.
I'll clear.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. Robert Swift and Karen Langley, reporters covering the state capitol, join me. By the way, Seamus McCaffrey, the Supreme Court Justice, just to be clear about that, resigned under pressure. There was no charges. Joan Ori, on the other hand, also was on the Supreme Court. Public corruption charges got her. She obviously had to resign, facing a conviction on some public corruption charges. All right, look, a genuinely sad day. Robert, you've covered a lot of these over the years. Rob McCord resigns. The saga continues, however. We still don't know, how much time he will get. We still do not know the full ramifications of this. Lots of stories this week about what he did or what he didn't do. Where does all that stand now?
He has, signed a plea agreement, but there's been reports in the Philadelphia Inquirer that the investigation is still going on of other people who might have been doing some of the fundraising for him.
Right.
The bigger pattern is over recent decades, in Pennsylvania, a lot of the corruption has evolved in these statewide offices. The treasurer has been seen of a tragic one about 28 years ago, where these offices don't get a lot of attention in the races. People get elected, a lot important jobs, but people they're not covered widely. Then a lot of times they want to make a springboard for a higher statewide race, which involves a lot of money raising.
Yeah, so they're raising it early. Karen, as part of this, obviously we have an interim serving now. A top lawyer in the Treasury has taken over for the time being, but we still have something very important that Governor Wolf has to do, right? Make an appointment.
Yes, he also has to pick someone for that, and they've said that they will do that quickly, although they haven't committed to any firm timeline. I believe that he has 90 days from the vacancy.
Right, and that person would serve until the end of Treasurer McCord, former Treasurer McCord's term, which would be through 2016, correct?
Yes,
and yet.
This is a situation we've seen, in other cases where row officers have gone on to higher office or moved on.
Sure. And the pledge Are we going to get that person's going to have to take a pledge that they won't run? Do you think?
You'll see that, and also once again, just like these Supreme Court nominations, you're going to see someone very, very qualified on the financial end, nonpartisan,
right?
Because of the nature, because of the way the vacancy occurred,
right?
That, and you're going to see,
So we're looking, Karen, at an appointment. Rob McCord was a Democrat. The expectation is the person would be a Democrat, or at least someone not involved in politics. Senate confirmation requires the magic 2/3
majority.
Majority for. Unlike the court nominees that require 2/3 the state. Now, I just learned something. I thought that was one of the offices. Majority, right?
I believe so.
Majority. And bottom line is, just as Governor Wolf reached out to Republicans in the Senate that control that chamber, reach out again. Can you?
There is a lot going on right now in terms of the governor picking, people or nominating them rather for various positions,
like his
and
own
the
cabinet.
Senate confirmation. As I think you mentioned, the Senate is moving ahead with positioning for a vote some nominations from Governor Corbett that Governor Wolf had tried to recall. So there's a lot in that dynamic.
I am confused about this. Governor Wolf comes in, withdraws these couple dozen nominations. The Senate is moving forward to confirm them. Do they actually serve? Does anybody know the answer to that?
In terms of...
Well, let's say a board appointment. He withdrew the nomination, let's say, of Jim Cawley, former Lieutenant Governor of Temple Board. He withdrew it. The Senate confirms him. If he does he serve?
Senate Republicans are maintaining that these people have been properly nominated, and the Governor Wolf making this announcement does not effectively take it back from them, that they are still allowed to confirm these people, and then these people would be legitimately in their positions.
Do you remember anything like this?
Yes, there have been. I think there was some in the Ridge administration. We got two groups of nominees here, some with obviously political ties. Or political backgrounds. Other ones, like to state system, higher board of education, non-paying jobs.
Yeah. So you think though we got to run? Do you think they'll work out a deal?
I think that's the
all right.
likely.
The Auditor General of the state, Eugene DePasquale, joins me. We'll get into money, saving, pensions. We'll do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Welcome back. Well, joining me is the Auditor General of the state, Eugene DePasquale. By the way, he tweets a lot about sports, right? You were just saying you get a lot of responses, don't you?
And I called it. I predicted the Patriots 24-20. It turned out 28-24 Patriots. So
okay.
Right margin, just slightly off on the score.
And did you pick a team? You're allowed to,
Oh no, I could care less who won it, other than root for the team you picked. I picked the Patriots to win by 4.
Well, I was for I don't know why people get so upset if you pick a team that they don't like or something. It's sports, but I do understand it. But anyway, let's go. Look, you've done a couple of audits recently that I think worth talking about. One has to do with all these municipalities, small pensions. We got something like 25% of the municipal pensions in the country,
that's
right here. Over $7 billion what's going on in these municipalities? Many of them cities.
Right.
Distressed. What's the situation?
First of all, a lot of people talk about our state pensions and the need to make sure that they're fully funded. But we, as the Auditor General, we audit every municipal pension plan in the state, and there's a whole host of reasons for that, why we're mandated to do that. And what would happen is we would see 3,000 here, 2,000 there, 10,000 there, and underfunded. And what I told my team is, let's put together the whole report to figure out what our unfunded liability is statewide, because it was not getting nearly the attention I think it deserved. And it turns out that we have nearly $8 billion in unfunded municipal pension liability. And if cities aren't able to meet their obligations, that means they're either going to have massive property tax increases, which no one wants,
and they can't, a lot of the cities can't afford it. I mean, you're from York. I live in, I'm from Lancaster. I mean, these are struggling cities, right?
The city of Scranton will go bankrupt within the next 4 years without a fix. They'll be the first to go.
And the other problem is that a budget, increasingly you're talking about 10, 15, 20, 25% of the budget going into pensions, right?
A municipality in the north central part of the state, I think it was Bradford City. I forget.
No, it is Bradford.
One third of their budget is their pension payment.
What's the solution? Consolidate them, put them into one?
I think you have to consolidate at least the administrative functions. I think the cities are going to have to do things to get into that system, and then the state's going to have to create a funding formula system to, in a sense, reward good behavior.
Yeah. All right. One other audit that you did that I think is very important has to do with tax-exempt properties. As you know better than anyone else, given what you've just done. In some cities, and I'm not, no one should be, there's good reasons for have tax exemptions. Some hospitals and churches, but they're disproportionately located in some places so that 25% of the tax base in some municipalities are tax exempt.
They're almost always located in the county seat, which would be yours, whether it is a city or borough or a township, but it's almost always the county seat. So in a sense, state policy dictates that all of these agencies go to this center part of the county, but then that municipality ends up having a tremendous burden on themselves. And again, you're right. Everyone understands churches, tax exempt. Everyone understands that. But we need to have a recognition of the challenge it creates for that municipality.
For the municipality. Now,
because those same agencies still need fire and police protection.
Yeah, and the real deal here is that some people say the solution is property tax reform. Wholesale, now you were in the State House.
That's right.
Wholesale property tax reform. Statewide, Bob, are you in that camp?
What I have said is that this does show, and when we had our hearing this week, it does show that the inequities in our property tax system helps drive a lot of these changes. And I was someone that I was one of the few Democrats that supported eliminating the school property tax and shifting it to other taxes.
Yeah.
However, I don't think the appetite is there to actually do it.
Yeah. All right, I'm chatting with Eugene DePasquale. He's the State Auditor General. We're going to also talk about charities and tax exempt and a constitutional amendment. We're not going to get into the details, but this is pretty important given the burden now on the average property tax holder as pensions and others drive up the cost. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Gives them 0% interest.
Maybe I'll start with that.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Well, Eugene DePasquale, he's the Auditor General of the state, elected by the voters to make sure waste, fraud, and abuse of your tax dollars. We kid about it, but it's very serious, and this is an important function. Before we get into the charities and local taxes and the constitutional amendment, you audit the books of the Department of Community and Economic Development, right? They do all the grants and work with communities.
Right.
A problem there you found?
A big problem. We did an audit there, and first of all, there's a big debate about whether the state should even be doing that in the first place. I mean, but everyone, I think, agrees that if we're going to be doing it, you got to make sure you're getting the promised jobs. Number one, we found out that there's very poor tracking of whether the jobs are actually met. That's number one. Number two,
you mean the state gives out money and whether
they get a real accounting of whether the jobs that were promised are actually created. That's
not smart.
No. Number two is we found that almost half the grants didn't meet the job projections that we were promised. So I've said you've got to have a wholesale review of your programs to find out why almost half your grant awards aren't meeting the job numbers.
Let me get this straight. We're giving out state dollars the DCED, the department, gives them out to companies, let's say, they don't produce the jobs and we lose the money.
Correct.
Do I got that right?
And even times where they get some of the money back, in a sense, you're giving a 0% interest loan as how it actually works in the real world.
That makes
to companies,
no sense
which
at
gives
all.
them a competitive advantage over their competitors.
All right. Right now, the courts in this state ultimately decide changes to laws, the law that deals with charities and local taxes, right?
Right.
So if you want a tax exempt, blah, 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 courts ultimately decide whether the legislature wants to take that over. In short, pushing a constitutional amendment. You testified, you don't want this, do you?
I have said we got to slow this process down. Number one, the one thing I'm actually very clear about is anytime you're looking to amend the Constitution, we should be deciding that in the general election, not a primary. In Pennsylvania,
so the voters get to decide this ultimately after 2 sessions of the legislature adopt it, goes to the voters. You want it in a general general election in the fall.
Pennsylvania, we have closed primaries, and I know anyone could technically come and vote in the primary, but in the general election, independents and third party and more Democrats and Republicans show up as well, whereas in the primary, you really only have your activists show up. And again, not that they obviously have a voice too, but in the general election, everyone gets to participate.
Now, what's the issue here? The issue is who decides whether a certain charity should be tax exempt. Is that the issue?
Clearly, I think the General Assembly is going to establish the rules that go with that, and the courts are always going to interpret that as we move forward. That's just the process of how it works. So if we're going to actually change how that's going to work, I just think we need to be very careful how we do it, because you have billions of dollars at stake in local revenue, and also for charities that are providing a very important social function for our state.
So here we go. Now let's go back to municipalities and counties.
Right.
Mayors and county officials have been very concerned about this, that if the legislature gets a hold of it, that they'll create more tax exemptions, right, and hurt their revenue. Is this go back, in a sense, to the problem we talked about, right?
It goes to the same issue that why I've been kicking and screaming about the municipal pension crisis we have in the state, because that wasn't getting nearly the attention, and I think my department, we helped change that. Same thing applies here. If it wasn't for the report that our team put together on this unfunded tax liability issue with municipalities, I don't think it would have nearly have received the same press attention that it's gotten, because it goes directly to the result of how do we fund fire, how do we fund police, how do our local governments function.
We have about a minute left. This may come out of the blue, but somehow I think we need, and you're from York, you were a state lawmaker, you represented York City part. Don't we really need to relook a lot at local government right now? Don't we need to sit down and say, we need a systematic study and then to know how we deal with these problems?
I remember, the statement there was the sniper in the D.C. area.
Yeah.
When that whole thing was going on, Pennsylvania, we would have had, in Maryland, it was one jurisdiction. Pennsylvania would have been 40 different jurisdictions.
Yeah, we need that. All right. Hey, thanks. Keep up the work.
Thanks, Terry.
We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well. Stay here.